The first time I realized the HOA had gone too far was the morning I found the notice duct taped to my front door. It wasn't in an envelope, wasn't politely mailed, wasn't even slid into the box like any other community announcement. It was slapped there like a warrant, as if someone was making a point. The paper flapped in the breeze, cheap ink bleeding from the dew, with block letters screaming about a $52 fine. The reason? My daughter had left her pink chalk drawings on the sidewalk outside our home. That's right, chalk, the washable kind that rain erases. I stood there in disbelief, staring at the flimsy paper while my 12-year-old Emma peeked out from behind my shoulder. Her drawings were innocent things: a crooked rainbow, a house with a chimney that puffed smoke, a stick-figure dog she named Cloud. But the HOA claimed it was defacement of property, a violation of the so-called covenant agreement that every homeowner had been forced to sign when we bought into the neighborhood. "Dad, did I do something wrong?" she whispered. Her big eyes blinked nervously, guilt that shouldn't belong to a child creeping into her voice. I crouched, crumpled the paper in my hand, and looked her dead in the eyes. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. They did." That was the moment. The fuse was lit. Most people in the neighborhood tolerated the HOA's power games. The board president, a woman named Carla Winters, strutted around like she was mayor of a city-state, dictating the color of mailboxes and the angle of garden gnomes. She wasn't satisfied until she had reduced people to bowing under the weight of her rule. People paid their fines quietly. They trimmed their hedges to the exact centimeter. They repainted fences the HOA said were too faded, and they never fought back, because fighting back meant harassment, lawsuits, or worse, ostracization. But me? I wasn't wired that way. They had no idea who they were messing with. See, before I bought this house, before I tried to build a quiet life for my daughter after losing my wife to cancer, I spent 20 years leading a specialized tactical unit, SWAT. My men weren't just colleagues, they were brothers, warriors forged through years of trust in situations where hesitation meant death. And though I'd retired, those bonds never broke. When I read that notice, something inside me clicked back into place. The soldier, the commander, the protector. I didn't start with aggression, no. I played it calm, collected. I emailed the board, politely asking them to waive the ridiculous fine. I even offered to pressure wash the sidewalk myself, though the chalk had already faded in the rain. Their response? A curt rejection. Payment was due in 7 days, no exceptions. 7 days passed, and I ignored them. That's when the real threats began. Letters escalated into bolded ultimatums. Failure to comply will result in action. Then came late-night knocks at the door, always when Emma was asleep. Anonymous voices muttering about consequences if I didn't pay. I knew the tactics. They were testing me, probing like an enemy scouting defenses. Then, on Friday evening, I came home to find another note jammed in the crack of my front door. This one wasn't printed. It was scrawled in rushed handwriting on yellow paper. "You pay by tomorrow, or we take what's owed, starting with your little girl." I froze. My blood went cold and my hands curled into fists. Threats were one thing. Coming after Emma was another. They wanted to escalate over $52? Fine, but I was already 10 steps ahead. They didn't know that every knock on my door, every shadow near my window had already been logged. They didn't know that I'd installed hidden cameras around my property the moment the harassment started. They didn't know I'd already reached out to my old unit. SWAT never dies, it just gets quieter. My brothers answered my call without hesitation. We've been waiting for something like this, a chance to stand together again. I gave them the rundown, showed them the threats, explained what these HOA thugs were planning. They didn't laugh, they didn't think it was small. They knew predators always start with something small. We staged quietly, carefully. I turned my home into a fortress without making it look like one. My garage became a command post. Radios were checked, surveillance feeds streamed to tablets. My men rotated in shifts, blending in as joggers, delivery drivers, or neighbors walking dogs. And me? I went on with daily life as if nothing was wrong. The bait had been set. On the third night after the yellow note, it happened. Around midnight, the crunch of tires rolled down my street. Slow, deliberate, predatory. I watched from my upstairs window as a black SUV crept to a stop across from my house. The headlights cut off, leaving only the faint glow of a street lamp. 4 men stepped out, not neighbors, not board members, hired muscle. Big frames, shoulders squared, moving with the false confidence of men who thought intimidation was power. They split into 2 groups. One circled toward my backyard, the other made for the front door. My cameras caught everything, and my radio buzzed with the voices of my team already moving into position. Emma was asleep in her room. I checked on her, peaceful, hugging her stuffed rabbit, and kissed her forehead. She had no idea what wolves were circling outside. That's how it should be. She would never know fear as long as I was alive.
Downstairs, I armed myself. Not with a rifle, though I had those locked away, but with something quieter. A taser, restraints, and the steel resolve of a man who'd been here before. Tonight wasn't about blood. It was about making sure these men never forgot what line they crossed. A knock rattled the front door, then another, harder, angrier. "Open up," one voice barked. "We're here for payment." I almost laughed. Payment. I whispered into my radio. Positions. The thugs kicked at the door. That was their mistake. Before the wood even splintered, 2 of my men melted out of the shadows, grabbing the pair from behind and slamming them into the pavement with surgical precision. Silence followed, broken only by the click of zip ties tightening around wrists. In the backyard, the other 2 were creeping toward Emma's window when floodlights blazed to life, blinding them. My sniper, who hadn't fired a rifle in years but still had the aim of a hawk, trained his laser sight right between them. They froze, hands instinctively rising. Another teammate swept in, tackling them to the ground. Within 40 seconds, it was over. 4 men, disarmed, restrained, whimpering on the concrete. Not a single shout, not a single cry reached my daughter's ears. She slept soundly as justice unfolded inches away. I stepped outside, taser in hand, and looked down at the trembling faces of the men who thought they could terrorize my family over $52. I said evenly, "You came to the wrong house, and you tried to take the wrong child." One of them stammered, We were just told to scare you." I leaned closer. "By who?" He swallowed hard. His silence was answer enough. I nodded to my men. They knew what to do. We weren't killers. We weren't thugs. But we knew how to send messages. Phones were confiscated. IDs were photographed. Each man's terrified face was logged in our files. Then they were escorted to their SUV and driven 2 towns over, stripped of their arrogance, dumped in the middle of nowhere with nothing but their zip-tied hands and a warning that if they came near my home again, they'd wish the police had gotten to them first. But I wasn't done. No, this wasn't about 4 pawns. This was about the queen behind the board. Carla Winters. And by the time I was finished, she'd learn exactly what it meant to declare war on the wrong man. The morning after, the neighborhood looked the same to anyone who hadn't been awake during the midnight operation. Lawns freshly watered, sprinklers ticking away, cars backing out for the workday commute. On the surface, everything was ordinary. But to me and my men, the game had shifted. I stood on my porch with a mug of coffee, scanning the cul-de-sac. The black SUV that had rolled in last night was gone, its former passengers licking their wounds somewhere far from here. But one house over, behind lace curtains, I caught the faintest flicker of movement. Someone watching me. Of course. Carla Winters had eyes everywhere. She was the queen of this fiefdom, and though she wouldn't have the nerve to come herself, she always had pawns, and pawns had a funny way of reporting back when they'd been smashed. I knew it wouldn't be long before she made her move. Sure enough, by afternoon, a letter arrived. Not taped this time, not even stuffed aggressively into my mailbox. It was hand-delivered in a white envelope embossed with the HOA's insignia, slid under my door. Carla was turning up the drama. I opened it, scanning the neat lines of legal jargon. You are in violation of Articles 7C, 12B, and 14A of the Covenant Agreement. Noncompliance and obstruction of HOA representatives will result in immediate escalation, including but not limited to property seizure, lien enforcement, and community-level action. Payment of $52 is no longer sufficient. Additional fees of $4,311 have been assessed for obstruction. This is your final warning. $4,311. For chalk drawings, for refusing to be bullied, for protecting my daughter. I set the letter down, calm as a priest before a sermon, because this was no longer about money. It was about Carla's need to dominate, to break me in public so the rest of the neighborhood stayed in line. She thought she was untouchable, cloaked in bylaws and attorneys and her smug little board meetings. But she had made one fatal mistake. She threatened my daughter. That changed everything. That night, I called a meeting. Not at my house. That was too exposed. We gathered in the old abandoned fire station just outside town, a place my men and I had used before as a training ground. Dust coated the floors, cobwebs clung to rafters, but it still smelled faintly of oil and sweat, of years of discipline. I laid out the situation, the harassment, the threats, the thugs, the fines. I spread the letter across a table and tapped the ridiculous number with my finger. This is not about money, it's about control. She's running this neighborhood like a cartel. And if she's willing to send men after my daughter, then you know this isn't the first time she's crossed a line. We're going to end this, permanently. The men nodded. No hesitation. We'd all seen tyrants in different uniforms, in different countries, trying to rule by fear. The playbook never changes, and neither does the way you dismantle them. We started with reconnaissance.
One man shadowed Carla's daily routine. She left her house every morning at 8:15 sharp, drove her Lexus SUV to the HOA office in the strip mall downtown, then spent hours micromanaging homeowners and terrorizing staff. Another teammate dug into her financial records, because money always left a trail. Another mapped her connections on the board, the little circle of sycophants who voted however she told them. Within days, the picture was clear. Carla wasn't just power-hungry. She was corrupt. HOA dues were being funneled into consulting fees for companies she herself owned. Maintenance contracts were awarded to her brother-in-law's business at triple the normal rates. And fines? They were her personal piggy bank. But the real kicker came when one of my men, a quiet tech wizard, cracked into her private emails. There it was, in black and white. Carla had ordered the hit on me. Not using those exact words, of course. She wrote about outside contractors who would enforce compliance and remove obstacles. But the implication was undeniable. I printed the emails, tucked them into a folder, and smiled for the first time in days. Now it was just a matter of execution. We waited for the next HOA board meeting. They held them in the community center, a beige little building with folding chairs and bad coffee. Attendance was usually low, most homeowners too beaten down to show up. But this time, word had spread. Carla was promising a special announcement. My guess? She was going to make an example out of me. Perfect. I walked in with Emma at my side, holding her hand tight. My men were already in place, scattered among the neighbors, blending in.
The room buzzed with nervous energy, whispers flying as Carla took her throne at the front table. She wore her usual smug smile, pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice dripping false sweetness. "It's important we address a serious matter of non-compliance that threatens the harmony of our community." She gestured toward me with theatrical disdain. "Mr. Carter here has refused to follow the rules we all agreed to uphold. He has obstructed HOA enforcement, endangered the integrity of our neighborhood, and accrued fines exceeding $4,000. Effective immediately, the board will be pursuing legal action to place a lien on his property." Gasps rippled through the room. Emma squeezed my hand tighter. Carla leaned back, satisfied, certain she had me pinned. That's when I stood, calm, collected, a folder in my hand. "Carla," I said, my voice carrying through the hall, "before you go further, perhaps the neighbors should hear how you've been using their money." Murmurs spread. Carla's smile faltered. I opened the folder and began reading, line by line. Company names, dollar amounts, payments funneled to her shell corporations, fines siphoned into personal accounts, and finally, the emails, her own words ordering thugs to intimidate me, to target my daughter. The room erupted. People shouted, cursed, demanded answers. Carla stood, red-faced, stammering denials. But it was too late. My men stood as well, revealing themselves, backing me with silent authority. "You think I'm afraid of you?" she screeched, voice cracking. "I run this community. Without me, this place falls apart." "No," I said, stepping closer, my voice low and steady. "Without you, this place can finally breathe." I laid the final piece of evidence on the table, a USB drive containing every file, every email, every transaction. "This," I told the crowd, "has already been delivered to the State Attorney General's office. By tomorrow, Carla Winters won't be running anything except her defense." The silence that followed was electric. Neighbors stared at me with wide eyes, then turned on Carla with fury. The board members, sensing the ship sinking, began muttering excuses and sliding away from her side. Carla tried to bolt for the door, but two of my men blocked her path. She wasn't going anywhere. By the time the police arrived, real police, not her hired thugs, Carla was trembling, makeup streaked, her perfect little empire collapsing around her. They escorted her in handcuffs, neighbors cheering as the queen was dethroned. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, I sat on the porch again. The air felt lighter, cleaner. Neighbors walked by and waved, some even stopping to thank me for standing up, for giving them courage. But I knew it wasn't just me. It was my brothers. It was the years of discipline that taught us never to bow to bullies. And most of all, it was Emma, my daughter, my reason, my anchor. She would never know the full danger of what happened. She would only know that her father stood up when it mattered most. The HOA dissolved within weeks. New leadership was voted in, people who actually cared about the community instead of controlling it. And the chalk drawings, they became a neighborhood tradition. Every summer, kids filled the sidewalks with rainbows and dragons and sons wearing sunglasses. The same neighbors who once bowed their heads now stood proud, free. As for me, I didn't need revenge anymore. Carla's fall was enough. Her empire of fear was gone, replaced with something real, something good. But every time I looked at Emma, I remembered one truth. They came for my daughter over $52, and they left with their entire empire in ruins.